If your creative push has helped you, you can help out the show by shopping on Amazon.com. All you have to do is head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right there and you can shop how you normally would. A small percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping cover the costs of creating, hosting, and maintaining your creative push. And you can make a big difference just by buying the things that you're going to anyway. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/Amazon, and thank you for thinking of the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 226.
If you can really do one thing for yourself, is just be so kind to yourself.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Christina Mrozik. Christina is an artist from Michigan who uses pen, ink, marker, and watercolor to compose semi-surreal visions of nature that are very different from the usual paintings of serene landscapes and friendly animals. She's currently based in Portland, Oregon, and enjoys working with arts education nonprofit groups. She's also currently being shown at Antler Gallery until June 26th. Christina, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for being here. I was hoping we could start out with maybe you giving us a brief bio, kind of an artistic summary of how you got to the point you are today.
Sure. Oh boy, it goes back really far.
Going back far. I like it.
We're going all the way back. I feel like my creative pursuit started when I was really young. I have a very creative, encouraging mother who is a fantastic painter and drawer, but never pursued that herself in terms of a career, but she was always making things in the house and starting craft projects. And it was so much a part of our life to just constantly be using our hands. And then my grandma lived next door and she was the same way. So I grew up surrounded by these craftsmen, who are just mothers and grandmas. And my dad did woodworking all throughout our house. And it was such a natural part of my life that I didn't really realize that was uncommon. So as I got older and had an interest in the arts and loved drawing, I always loved drawing. My parents were very supportive, very encouraging. They're both, I'm from a blue collar family. Mm-hmm. They wanted to just allow me to pursue whatever felt right. And I don't know, they just pushed me in that direction in ways that a lot of other people haven't gotten the encouragement. And I went to college for illustration and I did children's illustration for a while. And then after school, you enter this big black hole, this big, I was not prepared. I know nothing. Right. And I just had to really start making from a place that felt really honest and pursuing the things I was curious about and just keep putting it out there. I worked at a coffee shop for 5 years and saved enough money that I could scrape by for a year on nothing and then quit my job. And I've been freelancing ever since. So it's been this very sort of, it takes a long time to build. It takes so much longer than you could possibly imagine, but it's always been the thing I've been interested in and that I keep pursuing and allow it to change as I change and grow as I grow. So just endless hours of work. And you kind of finally get to a place where you meet enough people or you send enough emails or I don't know. It's all a little mysterious, really. I wish there was a clear guideline. I think so often we hope there's some structure you can just plug into, but really it's just to keep chipping away at it. And does that answer your question? I feel like that was a little long-winded, but
No. I have like a million questions to ask you now.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I totally agree. And I think that if it was like a formulaic kind of thing that, was correct for every person to do, then everybody would do it and it wouldn't be special. And yeah. I think that's why you need to put that hard work in, not just to like get better at your art or your whatever your creative passion is, but to also find your own unique path. Because when you like look back, you'd be like, wow, I'm the only person that could have gone down this path. But It's just like a matter of like taking the steps.
Sure, absolutely. I feel like art acts as a mirror so often. It's like revealing the parts of yourself that are inside there already, and you're just putting them out on paper. And then you have something to look at, but informs you about your inner world. So it's this back and forth process, and how you grow then, they're totally dependent on each other. The choices that you the options that you have that you say yes to or no to, it's this very meandering path. And the art in your story, they feed each other and mimic each other and mirror each other and take you places that you don't really understand. So I guess they inform each other down these very unique roads.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, a lot of people, sometimes when you look at millionaires or people that have gone down like a business route, or people that have had a steady job for their entire lives and they seem completely happy, sometimes that could be like kind of a false front. I don't know. Sometimes they think that they figured it out, but I think that the creative people, the artistic people, like you said, do actively look in that mirror for that back and forth thing to kind of constantly change and evolve. And that's a good thing,
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I truly believe that so much change comes from curiosity. Creativity is so much about pursuing the things that we're curious about, because then we get more information, we learn more, we seek out new reference points, new people to gather information from, history, stories, and then that compounds into information that you can act on. And art is a community space so often. I mean, it's certainly a personal space where you're creating a thing, but then you put it out into the world and it just automatically becomes a community space. So pursuing curiosity leads to that learning, and then to that sharing, and then to that growing. And those things are all innately connected. I don't think we can separate them out. So I really believe, even now more than ever, like we need to carve out spaces for our own curiosities and creative impulses. And that doesn't have to be pursuing a full-time art job, making and doing work. It can be crocheting or playing the guitar. My friend Dennis always talks about how everyone needs a hobby that they use their hands for, that it puts them in tune with themselves, and it kind of helps them move through the world differently, because they're like thinking through their hands and inhabiting their bodies, and then acting and participating in community through that. So for me, art connects all the parts of myself in this way. And I believe that's there with everyone. What Elizabeth Gilbert calls us the making ape. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that is sort of totally the weird thing, like that we have this creative impulse. And we see it in other species, certainly, like dolphins create games, whales create songs, but I just mean there's this, it's the part that we can't get rid of, that we almost have to pursue. It's like fascinating and beautiful and very mysterious, and thus back to the curiosity and the learning. So webby for sure.
Well, I think you're completely right. And like you said, your friend Dennis was saying, like, using the hands. And I know you've talked about that before, how, our minds aren't really that separate from our brains. I mean, sorry, our minds aren't separate from our bodies like we kind of think that they are.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, first I have to bring it back to like where that notion comes from. I am someone who, I get sick a lot. I have a really poor immune system. I've had years of my life on a couch or in like deep pain. Like I struggle. I have a spinal condition and like nervous system. So I think about the body a lot, and I'm very aware of my body all the time, constantly inhabiting it. So when I say this, it's coming from like, week 9 on the couch where you're like, I am useless. Boy, am I feeling it today. And realizing how often I've elevated my mind above my body, that I do this thing where I'm like, oh, well, you have to like, to have value, you have to think this way or be a good friend, or you have to, and really what it comes down to is like, to be of value, you have to exist. Like, when a baby is born, they can't do anything for themselves, and they're not really thinking anything yet. And yet we see them as these precious, like new things. So trying to figure out how to re-inhabit that space. And for me, a lot of that was, I elevate my mind, and I think of it as this thing outside of my body rather than an organ within my body that I need to give lots of sleep to and give good food to and allow it to rest. And and actually do a lot of like really normal body treatment to take care of it. I mean, there's so much to be said for taking care of the mind, but also to like take care of the mind as a part of your whole body, a more holistic approach. I think we tend to divide ourselves out. We tend to say like, oh, well, this is this and this is that. And we sort of create these separations between ourselves where we compare and we, well, if I looked like this, or if I felt like this, or if I could do this, or if I thought this way, or if I was part of this group, we're like constantly dividing ourselves into categories. And I think what I'm really trying to do is like through my art and through my work, figure out how to merge all those things back together into one really complex being rather than to divide all those out into digestible pieces. Like I'm like, do I have to be digestible? Does everything have to fit into a box? Like,
right.
Some days I like love someone and hate them at the same time. Like, you're never in one or the other. Like some days, you feel really awesome about one thing and terrible about another thing. And you can be happy and sad simultaneously, or you can be, we're very, multifaceted things, right? And I feel like we have this long history of separating everything out. And I don't think that's serving us very well. And it certainly hasn't served me. So, I'm trying to figure out how to like piece those things back together and create spaces where other people feel safe to do so also. Rather than it being like, well, you said this one thing this one time, so you're permanently forever over there. Like how to enable things like grace or movement for growth, or spaces where people can have conversations about things they don't understand, so that they can become educated without being hated. Like I feel like we need more of that. And that means a lot of times the people who are in harder spots being the teachers, which isn't really fair, but also I think there's more longevity in that kind of growth. And I think we're moving in that direction, or we could be if we keep working towards it. So, art's this like slow process of meditation and thinking, and you just like chew on all these things and process all these things. And I listen to like endless interviews with, so I'm always like chewing on new information and trying to figure out how to continue to piece it together and grow. And it's all very messy and beautiful and messy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's a good thing. Like we were talking about before, like there's no formula, like it's just so many different people have so many different perspectives. And I didn't think that this podcast would last, more than 200 episodes, because clearly we would talk about everything, and we kind of have, but everybody has a different take on their kind of creative blocks or their process. And I don't know, everybody has some unique thing to add that other people are like, yeah, you know what, that kind of applies to me. That kind of applies to me. Like you said, you can be happy and sad at the same time. You can be confident and totally unconfident at the same time as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I feel like somewhere in the art process, someone said that like everything you do has to be awesome, or like, that there's not space for insecurity and like the whole thing with art is about learning and growing and playing. And it's not really about good or bad or quality or not quality. It's sort of about learning from what you just made and how to incorporate that. And I feel like so often I'll talk to artists and they are just really dissatisfied with everything that they make. And I'm like, why? Like, like it doesn't have to be the best thing you ever done. Like I had a teacher in college who talked a lot about this growth curve of artists, is that you learn more while you're working on a piece than you are able to accomplish. So you look back on what you just made and you're not satisfied with it. But instead of seeing that as you being no good, or you being blocked, or you being stuck, or, like to see that as fuel for the next piece, I learned this much, and to focus on actually what you learned rather than what you created, and that it'll continue this process, and that you'll continue to learn more than you're able to create. But that doesn't have to be dissatisfaction. It can be like a focus on growth, and you can find it really beautiful and inhabit that space. And I think about that in terms of like making specifically, but also my life, where all the times where you're like, oh man, I didn't handle that well, or, oh, I didn't, but rather than to internalize that as you're like a person who's not good enough, or you're, not confident enough, or you don't have A, B, or C, how to internalize it as you're someone who's focused on growing and learning and changing. Like it makes all the difference for me. It's interesting how those parameters can change everything. So does that relate? Did I go off on a weird tangent?
No, like
okay.
you just blew my mind. I think that, that's the perfect kind of explanation for people who are always dissatisfied with their work, is the fact that, you kind of have this like glass that you can only fill up so much, like, and that's your skill set, you know what I mean? And as long as that's overflowing, like the glass will grow each time, because all this, it just wants to hold more of the things that you're learning. So just to kind of continue to keep pushing that. And if you are dissatisfied, to not give up, to see it almost as a good thing. Yeah,
I think so. I think like satisfaction with learning over dissatisfaction at not being, 80 years old with 70 years behind you, I think like, like this weird, like we have these weird, impossible goals. And then also I love the glass analogy. I think about this all the time. I think about how each person, where they're at with whatever they're going through, has a finite capacity, and like you can only fit so much into your life at once. And sometimes it's something else. Sometimes it's, but you can only handle so much or hold so much. But as you're growing, like that capacity does slowly expand, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's not quick. It's this slow stretching and ability to hold more, but you still have like a finite amount you're able to do or perceive or handle. Sometimes you have to like have a space to pour it all out and like start over, so I think about that a lot. Capacity.
Right.
It's a good, on like a sick day, you're like, today my capacity is 0. Like, so.
Right. And some mistakes or some lessons that you need to learn take multiple learnings, and you have to make that mistake like kind of over and over again to like really be like, oh, okay, all right, to like really finally fix it. So sometimes it takes like overflowing that glass like quite a few times before you finally get it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Gosh, like I feel like you just described what it is to be human. Like, yeah, like, for sure. Yeah. So talking about your art and your kind of style specifically, how did that develop? Was that your style since you were at the coffee shop, like trying to figure things out, or has it like evolved over time as well? Oh, I mean, I think something every artist should do, no matter which stage they're in their life, is pull out everything they've made as far back as they can go and have everything out at the same time. Because what's really interesting is, like for my work, I can pull it all out and I can see things in common with things I made when I was 10. You're like, oh, there's a core here of interest. And it's a space that has not left me, that I just, no matter how many times I ask the question or pursue it. And that tends to be around like nature themes, or, I have sketchbooks from when I was 10 years old of like, I had a sketchbook like of 100 trees, and it was like all trees like splitting in interesting ways, and every way that trees could wrap, or, and now I'm like, oh, I'm kind of doing that same thing sometimes, and just doing it with grass, or the skill has gotten better, but there's something there. But then there's also these other bits that I watch come and go, where it's like playing with really bright colors for a while, and maybe it's like cartoony style, and, and then it's, like children's illustration. I did that for a long time. But even when I pull those out, I see these common threads of playfulness or of detail there. I'm like, oh, I figured that out here, but I apply it in this way now. Like, so my style has certainly like shifted and evolved, but I feel like your art should be a reflection of yourself. And the only reason it should stay the same is if you do. And if you're on a path of growing and shifting, like your work should grow and shift with you. And you should feel like you have permission to allow it to change. So often I think you get kind of known for something and then you feel stuck doing that. And it almost feels like your whole personhood can't grow anymore because you're defined by this like thing that you do.
But I think it's always, whenever you feel stuck, it's like, well, try something totally different. I just started doing ceramics, and it's like opened up my world even more. I'm like, oh, I can think in these ways now, and I'm brand new at it, and I'm still like fumbling and trying to figure out, like I haven't even really stepped into that door far enough. But I think like that's like maybe the work in general, how it should shift, but also there's these commonalities. But in terms of creating your style, I think the best thing you can do when you're young is to try a bunch of styles and just see what feels good and what feels natural and what things excite you, and kind of start there. Like, being a full-time artist is going to throw so many things your way that are hard and difficult and overwhelming. Like, I don't get to just make art. I have to do taxes and read and write contracts and send in time, right? Like all this other work that's actually like 80% of the business that are not things I'm naturally geared towards. There's so many things that are like so hard that I hate doing that I do on the regular, 30 hours of emails a week, that kind of stuff where I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying. But, but like, so I think then if you're going to do the art, like, make sure you get lost in something that you really like, that feels really good, because, like if you're like hating what you're making because you think it's what you should be making, then you're just doing yourself a double disservice. And I see people do that, they're like, well, like this is what I should be doing, or this is what people like, but it's not really what they like or what they want to be doing. And, it doesn't feed them. So then you're living your whole life not being fed. I think starting just where you're interested, starting with the things that you love doing. Like for me, when I was like 20, I made a list, and it was like, I love texture. I love organic shapes. I love like lots of little line work. I love when I draw slow, just like all the things that felt good in my body when I was making. And then, I also made a list of things I hate. Like, I am terrible at design. Like I have no like graphic design stuff. Like I see it and I'm like, that's beautiful. And when I sit down to do it, I have no skill set there, and it's really difficult. I don't do well with geometric shapes. I can't think that way. And I'm like, so, I'm not going to incorporate those things. There might be a painting in the future once you've sort of more established and you've mastered things, where you want to start adding some of those more difficult elements in. And I think that's good because it helps you grow. But, you don't need to like build your whole art focus there. Like it should be like the things that you're innately drawn to rather than the things you're innately like repulsed by,
So one of the things I talk about all the time is like how, like, cause I write. So like once you're a writer, like you can't really read like anything else as anything else but a writer. Like you're trying, like you analyze, like you're like, oh, I see what they did there, or, oh, I wish I did that there. I think that that's really it's cool to have that, but sometimes it kind of ruins the process of being a reader. And like for you, like with graphic design, being able to like understand that something's beautiful but not be able to do it. Like I love like I've always like thought about like creating music myself, but at the same time I love listening to music so much, and like not knowing how they did that, that's where like some of the magic lies. So I don't want to like kind of pull back the curtain and see like behind the scenes, if that makes sense. Like it's great to have those things that you can draw inspiration from, that you're still like really inspired and like just in awe of.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. I think in our culture, anytime you like someone, anytime you like something, people are like, you should make that your career. Like I also love music. People are always like, oh, well, you should. And I'm like, no, man, this is just for fun for me. Like
you can't do everything.
I don't want to do everything. Sometimes I just want to enjoy it. Like, right. And leave that magic there and leave that mystery there. I think that's a great way to put it. Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned like when, 80% of your work is kind of like all the secretarial work, the, emails and taxes and all that stuff. And then when you get to the 20% of your time to do your art, like it better be something that you enjoy. And a lot of people do find that they start to hate it, or they feel like it's part of the job, which is the whole point of like not having a job, was like the whole point of doing the art was like something that you enjoy. So what about somebody who's listening right now that maybe finds themselves to start to go in that direction where they're like, oh, it feels like work when I get to my work, when I get to my art? Like, what would your advice to them be? Because there is still that concern of, not only feeding themselves artistically, but feeding themselves literally, like to be able to make money from it so that they can feed themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm in that boat like 110%. So something a lot of people don't know is I actually make almost my entire living off of commercial work. I don't promote any of it.
Oh, really?
I don't share it. I don't put it out there, but I probably spend a solid 40 hours a week doing commercial illustration for different companies. And I'm drawing cartoons and I'm doing design and I'm doing all these things I'm not good at or don't really care about, in that deep integral way. But that is the work that puts food on my table and, gives me the time and space to pursue the things I am interested in. How I navigate that is I see it as there is drawing as a technical skill that I have. And then there is art making as a creative process that I have. And I try very hard to sort of give them separate spaces. So when I'm working on my technical work, that's maybe like a commission for, a job, I can enter into a headspace where I don't hate it. I'm just like, I have this technical skill and I'm doing A, B, and C. And like, this isn't really art for me. This is just a skill set that I have. And then when it's time to enter into the more personal pieces and things I care about, I try and create space around it. I get a good night's sleep. I allow myself to lay in bed and daydream. I shut off the devices. I go for a walk, go out into nature. Sometimes it's crazy, but you can need 2, 3, 4 days off before you can even tap back into it sometimes. Or, you can get so tired or so overworked that you're just like, I hate this, but then there's the space that's worth it when an idea meets you and you get to have a conversation and kind of play through it and feel how it goes and learn something about yourself. So, it's hard. And I think a lot about, how do I do less of that? Maybe I move somewhere cheaper. Maybe maybe this is just what it's like for the next decade. And then I get to do the next phase. I have all sorts of parameters around, and I'm always asking that question. You could ask anyone that knows me and they're like, oh yeah, this is Chris's number one problem. So I relate to it, but I think just seeing it as special and important and trying to separate them out from each other so that the work that gets hard or tiring is different from the work that feeds you and gives you life, and trying to have a space for both of them. I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what happens then when you're doing the commission work? You're doing the work that's just because you're skilled at it, and it's not necessarily something that you're loving. But you have 20 hours of work to do, and then suddenly something through that work or something just that you're listening to while you're doing your work, you get to meet that idea and you start to have a conversation with it. But you have all this work that you have to do to put food on the table. What is that experience like? And do you just put that commission work aside and have a conversation with that idea? Or do you kind of just write it down and put it off for later when you do have that time?
I don't know. It's not the same every time, maybe. I tend to get my ideas not when I'm working. I tend to get them when I'm laying in bed or out for a walk or alone, or when it's quiet. If I really want to have a good creative day, there will just be no noise anywhere. And it'll just come find me. No music, no Netflix, no podcast, just a silent house with a very needy cat. But, so it's tricky. I mean, it can be hard or painful. I think it sort of depends what you have to do. And are you on contract with the company? What's your timeline? If I have enough space to put my commercial project down, if I have enough time to, I will. And then, get into that creative zone. If I don't, then I'll jot it down or write it down and try and build my commercial work with also pockets for my personal work where I'm this week is this personal project, and that I just am going to think of as a commitment, and I have time carved out for it. Sometimes I have to do that months in advance. you work with a big company and they maybe have like 10 things for you to do over the next year, and it's like, so I have to like carve pockets out ahead of time. I don't know. It's all a little mysterious and magical. I wish there was a clear answer. The truth is it's just hard. Like it's hard and there's no real clear answer, but I think you have to like try and advocate for time and space for those creative moments. I know some people, like I have friends that are, they're like freelancers and moms, and they're like, you know what? I get a 1 hour window every day. That's for me. And that's the time I'm in. That's the era I'm in. Like that's where I am right now. And I just enjoy that and choose not to be bitter about the rest of it. Like it's like kind of a little bit of a mental choice. And also just acknowledging that it's hard, or having safe spaces to be like, this sucks, like have like people to talk to, like hang out with other artists where you can all kind of like, complain together. I think you need that. I don't know if that's, there's so much good stuff, but there's also so much hard stuff, and you just need a space to be like, yeah, I don't know. I'm tired and I'm bored and, it's hard. So I don't know.
Right.
All the social medias curate everything to look so beautiful and easy, and that your life is just this all the time. And it's not really true for anyone. A lot of people are working full-time jobs and then painting in their garage for like 2 hours a night. And then we just know them for their show work, but like, that's not really their life. So I think trying to bring the reality of life to the work, and then to the platforms too, where we can talk about that more.
For sure. I think, like you said, so much of it comes down to mentality, because people are busy. They do have jobs and kids and fill in the blank, taxes.
Yeah.
And so much of it does come down to the kind of story that you tell yourself. You could either be like, this really sucks, I don't have enough time, so I'm not even going to try. Or you could be like, this really sucks, I don't really have much time, but I'm going to find a little bit of time anyway and try to squeeze it in, even though I am a super busy person.
Yeah.
This is something that I want, so this is something that I'm going to do. And here, I found 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And it's just to tell yourself that story. And then you can start to tell yourself like this really awesome story when, like you said, like, you develop your skills, and then you suddenly have like another personality, like a gallery presence, where that's all people know you for, but you wouldn't have been able to have that kind of a persona, that kind of a career, if it wasn't for you telling yourself that story from the jump, that I'm going to make the time.
Yeah. The artist Anne Hamilton has this super beautiful On Being interview, and she in it is answering a question about like, well, what do you, it was like a mom who's like, I have like 3 small kids. What do you do? And Anne Hamilton was like, sometimes art making is making the soup. Like, sometimes that's what it is, and I was like, yeah, like some days it's, like where your creativity is present maybe isn't always on paper or canvas. Sometimes it's making dinner or inventing a game, or, or trying to figure out how to pretend you're good at math to do taxes, or, or like, trying to like boost your self-confidence so you feel smarter when you go to the accountant, like, like whatever it is, like, like sometimes that's actually the art making, it's that part where you're working on yourself, right? Like that can then come out later. So.
And so much of that is mentality too, is not, because when you're not doing your art, when you're not doing things that bring you joy, is to like try to find joy in it anyway, because otherwise you're just going to kind of live like a really pissed off, sad life, like, so to try to find joy. And that's just like a life thing, I guess, is just to try to find the beauty in every moment. Yeah.
I mean, it's like yes and no. It's sort of like, I'm like, yeah, totally. And then I'm also like, well, like sometimes though, like sometimes you're having a shit day, and just like be like, today's a shit day. Like I'm tired and bummed for whatever reason, or, like,
I give up today.
Yeah. And that's okay too, like. Yeah.
Like you said, sometimes you need four days in a row of that before you can get back to it.
Yeah. I mean, so it's like, I think it's this combination of, yes, trying to find the beauty in the moments of what you're doing and the parts that you have gratitude for, And then also not putting the pressure of gratitude onto every single thing. So like how to like navigate where you can actually enjoy something without having that like pressure of I should be enjoying this, or I should be thankful for this, or I should. Just like how to get rid of the shoulds, period. If you're having a bad day, it's like today's a bad day. If you're having a good day, today's a good day. And just like kind of let them be what they are. But I think trying to keep things like envy or bitterness like out of anything, just like avoiding certain things. You know, I'm like, today I'm tired. Tired is fine. I'm sad is fine. But, you know, there are certain pockets that are maybe less healthy. And I think going down wormholes where you're like self-comparing, like just get yourself out of that, you know, like go get away from that. So, you know, it's like space for both. I feel like there have been just as many moments or things where I'm like, man, I know I'm doing this art thing and it's awesome. And I just should feel like this is the best. And it's sort of like, that's just as guilting and shaming of a sentence or a existence, you know? So yes. And like, find the beautiful space and allow yourself to like not be there, you know, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. As long as you find time to get to your art, then whatever works for you.
Yeah. Whatever works, you know, it might be different from anyone else's system. I think trying to find your own system.
Yeah.
Just asking a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, getting back to your work, I know that I've heard you describe the way that you start a piece in kind of a really awesome way of kind of uncertainty or like not really knowing exactly what it's going to become. And the way that you kind of don't even sketch it out. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. There's so many times where I don't really have a clear idea at all. I just know I'm feeling creative, you know, and I'll just sort of sit down at a piece of paper and see what's in there. And I don't really sketch. I feel like I'm one of those people that as soon as I sketch it down, there's no point in making it. Like it's in the world now. Like, you know, even if it never it exists somewhere. I don't have to like put it down. So I tend to go straight into a rendering where I just keep slowly mapping it out, and it's sort of an interesting practice of letting it evolve. Like I don't know, it's a little bit magical and mysterious. So
we love magical and mysterious on the show. So.
You know, it is.
Totally fine.
So, I'll sit at a piece of paper and just sort of wait for it. And I am fearless about white paper. I know some artists are very like hesitant or afraid of white paper, and I have no feelings about it. I just have no problem like paper after paper putting things down, and I'll actually just sit for a long time and slowly render it out. And the shapes themselves reveal things. I'm like, oh, that kind of looks like this, and this kind of looks like that. And then I'm like, oh, well, what if I cut it here? Or what if I added this here? It's sort of like sketching, but it happens really slowly, you know, where I have to kind of really map it out, because the parts that inform me are the details much more than the overall shapes. So I have to kind of get to a point where I'm like, oh, this texture reminds me of this, and I could add this to it, and it'll come together and transform kind of slowly. And then the longer I look at it, I'm like, I need something here compositionally. Like I know compositionally I need something there, but what's the right idea that's really going to make it shine or feel right? Or, you know, and I have pieces that hang on my wall for a year sometimes. I just don't know what to do with them. Like, you know, and I'm sure I'd be a faster art maker or have more cohesive bodies of work if I pre-planned things. But for me, so much of the making is the thinking itself. You know, they're not always ideas that have been hashed out and then put together. They are the hashing out. So like, then it'll hang on my wall, and then I'll be reading something in bed, and I look over at it on my wall, and I'm like, oh, that's that. I didn't know.
Magic.
Yeah, you know, and it's like it was in there, and you're pursuing it elsewhere, and someone else names it for you, and you look and you're like, of course that's what that is. And then suddenly you know how to finish it, or suddenly you have like the right information for how to name it or how to talk about it. I love reading poets and I love reading like poetic writers and people's journals, and because they say these really honest things about their life and you're like, oh yeah, that. And then you look over and you're like, oh yeah, that, it's right there. I was already working through this. So yeah, it's all very, I've said this before, but my pieces feel like my journals, where you sit down at your journal and you don't really know what you're going to write. You just sort of start talking about your day or your life or a memory or whatever it is, a place that you are. My drawings feel like that to me. I'm just sort of like using the language that feels the most natural to me, which is these natural world things. I grew up in a really beautiful place, and that is my language, my innate language. Words always feel secondary, maybe even third. I think it's movement and then imagery and then language for me. It's like the actual process of moving my hand is what helps my brain think or understand, more than it is like seeing something. It's like moving my body. And I think that pulls back to like inhabiting what's in there. My body's like internalized an idea in a way, and then it's coming out through a metaphor, and then I can speak or add language or name it much later, so, but I know what it is. I know the feeling. I recognize the feeling. I just don't have the word for it, which, like we as humans feel that way all the time. We're like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like this. And like, you're like struggling. You're like, there's no real word for what I'm feeling, but I know it's true and honest and real and deep. We have these like gut understandings of things all the time. And we so often ignore or kind of like pick at them until they're not whole anymore because we don't trust them or something. I don't really know. I'm still working through that, but
yeah. Well, I think that's kind of the whole thing about art, is that understanding without words. Like if you see a dancer or I always use the term watching somebody draw tickles my brain. Like I get these like chills, like seeing it, exactly like you described, like the movement. It's that like that kind of understanding of something else, like that it's coming from something else through their pen or their paintbrush or whatever it is into the world, you know what I mean? And only the way that person can. Would you have any advice for people who haven't really noticed that own kind of movement with themselves, like the actual process of doing the art, like getting that kind of feeling to kind of recognize that? Is it just like about slowing down and really like appreciating the movement?
I don't know what it is. I mean, I guess if it was for someone who functions and thinks like I do, that might be what it is. 'Cause for me, it's certainly about slowing down and finding quiet spaces. Art is just as much a practice of listening as it is of speaking. It's this really interesting combination of trying to kind of hear what's already there and put it down and be like, is this what you are? And it's like, no, I'm not this, but yeah, I'm this. But, for some people, it's such a different experience. They feel it differently. They move with it differently. If someone's like, some people move with speed, and speed is what feels good for them. And that's sort of what brings them to life. Or some people it's, like additive or deductive, or, sometimes it's drawing. Some people like to, it might be, I think it's certainly like your hands and your body, and there's a certain sensation like that manifests, but I don't know if the same thing could work for anyone, but I do think maybe just thinking about your body or having an awareness of your body and like what feels right might be a good place to start. I think having that self-awareness of like your physical self rather than just your brain self while you're making, I try and think a lot like, oh, like my back hurts. Like I should sit differently, or like, oh, I'm like death gripping, like, 'cause I'm not really paying attention, and it's like how to like kind of inhabit all of you at once. But I'm sure like, I don't know, like what I do probably wouldn't work for Picasso or Jackson Pollock, or, like people whose work is so different from mine, inhabiting such different spaces. And it might not, I don't know if it is about the movement for everyone. Like, some people it's about the mapping. Like it's like the the process of like layout or structure. And some people, it's the filling in part that they really I love the building part, and I love the mystery of how it kind of comes together. But I think for some people, it's like totally different parts of it that turn them on and light them up. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all one big mystery. It really is.
Oh my God. I know. Should we talk about how much we don't know? Like, I feel like that's all I could really say. Like,
well, that's the whole point of the podcast is talking about it and bringing it out, and so that we can have these discussions so people realize that they're not alone with not knowing anything.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I wanted to, before we let you go, talk about you're right now in the process of like kind of going on a new front, like translating your drawings from 2 dimensions to 3. So I was wondering, could you talk about that and some of the things that you're learning from that? You already kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. I said to a friend the other day, I've always had this like an innate curiosity about 3D work. When I was in college, I did 3D work for a little while and I really loved it, but it wasn't really what picked up or was getting attention. So it kind of got put on the back burner. But I was feeling stuck and I thought, I should do that. It'll be fun. Like, it'll just be fun. It'll feel good. As I've been working with clay, I realized, and this is what I said the other day, I was like, drawing has felt so much like learning an instrument. You practice and you practice and you practice. Someone teaches you how to like create form, which is like learning how to read the notes, and there's a structure there, and you learn like how to draw reflected light and like how to arrange things and how to compose. And it's this whole learning structure, and you really have to master the structure before you can tear it apart and before you can like innately go at it. Like drawing's innate in some ways, and it's very much a process of learning in these other ways. But working with clay felt more like singing, like rather than learning an instrument, it felt like you already kind of have a voice that you use, and it flows in such a different way. And of course you hone it, and you still learn how to use it and master it, but it was kind of already there. It was like a little more innately there. You can just do it right away, like there's not this huge process of like, this is an A and this is a B and this is a C, which is kind of what drawing is. Drawing's like years and years if I don't get it, and then you do. And ceramics was like, oh, I get it, like right away, like, oh yeah, I know this. Now it's just a matter of, I know nothing about, it's so technical. I know nothing about the like firing processes and the glaze processes. And, there's like this whole other realm, but the making itself isn't necessarily the part that's as like technically oriented. It's a little more like feeling it out, at least for myself, It depends what kind of 3D work you do. So, if you're a mold maker, the whole thing's technical. So like, but that's kind of how it's felt for me, like singing. So.
And then does like that translate back, like we were talking about the mirror thing, like does that also reflect back into your drawing then? Like, do you learn lessons from the 3D work into when you go back into 2D and kind of look at things differently?
Yeah, I'm just starting, so it's still so new. I'm trying to figure that out, but I'm sure it will. Like, I have no doubt that it will, but I don't know if I could name specifically how it has yet. I feel like that might take 2 or 3 years to really figure out. Like, it's like a long game.
Right.
But I'm absolutely certain that it will. But yeah, I'm still kind of learning how. It's still pretty new and fresh, and I'm just sort of like, hey, like, who are you right now to it? So I think that relationship will get even stronger down the road. But I hope to be able to keep doing it. Yeah.
Very cool. We can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
And before we let you go, I wanted to talk about your show at Antler Gallery.
Yeah.
So this will be airing on the 12th, which is a Monday. So people will have, if they're in the Portland area, about 2 weeks. It goes till June 26th, right?
Yes, it goes till June 26th. I feel like my work as of the past 6 months, is sort of embarking in a new direction. These pieces felt a little risky to me. They're really quiet. They're really quiet. They're really still. They're very kind of tender and frozen. And I was really trying to create a space that felt like it was just as much about listening as it was about talking. I know we talked about that earlier. So I feel like they're a little bit sparser and more delicate and a little bit more simple. And I'm really trying to create both room within myself to listen more and to sort of, I think they need to be sat with a little bit longer. You know, some of my pieces, they're like bright and beautiful and they tell a story right away. You're like, oh, I feel that, like a gut punch. And these are not gut punchy pieces. These are like, you kind of look at every day and they creep up on you pieces. They're like, we've been lingering in the attic.
We've been waiting.
Yeah. Or that spider web in the corner. You know, they're like,
sounds terrifying, Christina.
no, it's beautiful.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know. So, you know, they're much quieter pieces. But I think I've been trying to like create that space for myself where I can allow parts of myself that have maybe been silenced or buried to surface and to have a little room to exist. So yeah, to me, they feel quiet and maybe tender. I feel pretty excited about that, but I also feel like it needs to be said, because if you go in and you're looking for like that strong feeling, it's more about like listening than it is about shouting, you know? So,
right.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of hesitancy? Like you said, you felt it was risky. Was there hesitancy then to really push forward with it and to choose those pieces for it?
I think it's sort of like, I still feel uncertain about it or something. Like, this feels like the body of work before the body of work, if that makes sense. Like, these are the in-between pieces. These are the pieces about like stepping off, but I'm not quite at the point where I really understand where they're going, and a little bit in no man's land. I think things are going to get more, I don't necessarily like the word abstract for what I'm describing, but I think they're going to start to dissolve a little more. I think it's going to be less concrete. I think as I become less concrete, they're doing the same thing. You know, it's like the more I open myself to new possibilities and ideas and feelings, and, you know, the work's kind of doing that too. It's like opening up a lot, and I'm sort of interested to see where that will go. And it might be a back and forth. Like sometimes that's how growth works, is you kind of jump ahead a little and then you step back and then you jump ahead again. And then, you know, and it takes a little while and then they kind of even out and merge and you see it in its wholeness. So these feel like a jump that I don't fully understand yet, but even if I know what they're about, and even if I like understand that quiet space, like it's still maybe like a direction I myself am heading rather than something I feel completely like in already. You know, it's sort of like dipping your foot in the pool. Like, am I gonna, you know, I'm kind of in, but I'm kind of not. Like it's that liminal space or that crack. So,
right. Well, I love your self-awareness, and just like knowing that it's, you know, like you described it as calm. It's like the calm before the storm, but also like just your bravery to kind of like you said before, to pursue those curiosities, because that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. It means it's nice to hear, you know.
Absolutely. Sure. So, Christina, before we let you go, it is time for the final push.
Sure.
And this is where I ask you to kind of reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Oh, boy. So many things.
All the things.
All the things. Oh, God. I think if you can really do one thing for yourself through all of the making and the pushing and the working and the endless, tireless, like creative endurance game is just be so kind to yourself. It is a hard path, and asking questions is not easy, and pursuing mystery is not easy, and it doesn't always make sense, and it's not always definable. So make sure in everything that you do, you build both a space for learning and for self-grace, just to really be kind to yourself, however that manifests. I don't mean like excusing bad behavior. I mean like
give yourself an ice cream cone.
I mean if you do something, if you work really, I worked really hard today, or I pursued this thing, or some days I feel like I'm not doing good, but I'm actually growing and I can see that. Or be around people that will build you up, like find spaces you feel like positive and comfortable in, like take care of yourself. Like that, like if you're going to do the work, like make sure you have room to like mend through the process, like be kind to yourself. That's like the best advice I can give to any person, really. So
absolutely. It's being kind to yourself and just really appreciating when you do fill up that glass, like we were talking about before, is just like, learning and not being too hard on yourself when, you're not quite at the point that you want to be at with really anything in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That right there. Thank you.
That. Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, Christina, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. This was such a great interview, and thank you so much for your thoughtful questions.
Oh, well, thank you for your time and your thoughtful responses.
Thank you.
And you can find Christina on her website, which is ChristinaMrozik.com. That's ChristinaMrozik.com. And on Instagram, she is Christina Mrozik Art. And you can find everything we talked about today, including links to Antler Gallery to go check out her stuff. If you are in the area, we'll have that linked up at yourcreativepush.com/Christina Mrozik or yourcreativepush.com/226. Christina, thanks again.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, what a fascinating episode. Really awesome talk with Christina. And she touched on this really epic point, and I think that this probably applies to most people listening. And I've really been searching for a way to describe this feeling throughout these 200 plus episodes of Your Creative Push. And it's her order of understanding things and putting art out into the world, going from movement, then imagery, and then words. And she starts out with that feeling that she gets in her body that she is able to then put out with a metaphor into the world. And then the imagery is there for her to better understand it, like that mirror thing we were talking about. And then after all that's done, she's able to kind of put a name to it. And that goes perfectly with what Ty said in our last Best Of episode, how the first time he experiences art, or one of his pieces, is when he makes that last mark and puts the pen down and then finally takes it in. And getting into that zone is what this is all about kind of finding a way to let go while you're creating and taking that judgment away, to put all of those questions out of your mind and just allow it to come out, like you are kind of a vessel for it. Don't worry about what you're trying to say, just say it and then figure out what you just said afterwards. Like Christina, try to let your body internalize an idea, and then it comes out, and then you can speak or add language to it at a much later time. And when you're able to do that and really get good at it, then you can even start to get a feeling about your body of work. Like Christina was saying with her new show, it's like she is in a transition stage kind of as a whole, not just with each piece. Like it's a step along the way and feeling like something else is coming later. So it's just trying to continually practice to get in that zone your own way. Perhaps you have a different order of the way that you do things. Perhaps the name comes first and then you're able to piece it together. Whatever works for you, whatever you're able to do to get out of your own head and to get in the zone like that, do that. Keep doing that. Keep practicing that. And you'll see that it will start to not only work for each piece that you're working on, but your body of work as a whole and your creative life as a whole. So again, huge thank you to Christina for coming on the show. On Thursday's show, we have Yelena James. Yelena is a really talented artist who uses pens, inks, and markers and acrylics to make these kind of complex, abstract forms. She has a really cool style, and if you want to check out her work, you can go to yelena.com. That's YELLENA.com, or you can find her on Instagram. She is Yelena James, or you can find links to all of her work, as well as everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/226. But that is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we'll be here for you next time. If you need the push again, I love you all, and we will see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.